Okay, so I was in class, and we were talking about feminism, and this one girl in my class just raised her hand, and she said, you know, like, I really just hate feminism. I think feminism is just really stupid, and women should just all suck it up and, like, go and do whatever they want to do.
The way that people can oftentimes, like, dismiss, like, feminism as, like, a useless thing.
It's really sad how much I think feminism is misunderstood. And
feminism is basic belief in equality. And you don't have to be radical or crazy or even part of some big movement to be a feminist.
My mom grew up in a house where, like, both her brothers went to college and, like, her parents paid for them, and, like, her parents refused to pay to send her to college. You know, like, that was, like, something really real in her life.
It's still real in our lives. I mean, I think the need for feminism hasn't changed.
Prison is a small town. You know, you have the diner that you would go to, or you have the laundromat where your clothes are washed. It's just that you can never move.
There are about 308 million people in the United States, and about 1.6 million of them are in prisons throughout the United States. That doesn't even count jails, and it doesn't count people who are under community supervision. So for Iowa, we have 9 prisons. There is one that is a dedicated women's prison, the Iowa Correctional Institution for Women.
We have about 600 women here today, which is way over capacity.
We incarcerate more women than any other country in the world. We have the highest rate.
I've been in here for 6.5 years, and I see how these women just come in and out and in and out. Somewhere along the way, they got tired. And I don't want to get tired, because it's so easy to do. It's so easy to do, to just get tired.
My daughter asked my mom once if Mommy was in jail, and I had talked to her about that the people, the parole board, would let Mommy know when she could leave. And she was like, oh, okay. And she said, because you've been here a long time.
Just the average citizen that pays taxpayer dollars to keep a prison going really doesn't know what's going on in the prison system, and people should know what's going on.
I came to prison when I was 17 years old. I got a 45-year sentence with a mandatory of 17 years. I just got tired of everything, the abuse, always the moving around, the running from the cops, running from our family. It's safer in here. Instead of out there when you can't do anything without having to look over your shoulder.
I've been in prison for 23 years, and I have a life without parole sentence. I committed my crime at age 17, and I've had every birthday from 18 through 40 in prison.
When you go into a women's prison and you sit and listen to their stories, it forever changes you. And it changes how you think about feminism, how you think about women's lives.
When you're going to judge somebody, you know, I don't think you can judge them until you understand everything about them. I mean, everybody has a story, you know.
I'm Emma. I'm really excited. It's nice to meet you all.
I'm Noga. Hi.
Like, I have family in prison, you know, like, it's a big thing for a lot of people.
I've never had an interaction in a prison. I've never met people who have been incarcerated.
And I've never taught a feminism class in a maximum security women's prison before. And I've been teaching since my first year at Grinnell College.
The Grinnell Prison Program is a collection of students and faculty who devote their time and energy to teaching inmates. It's an unbelievable environment. And as teachers, you learn so much.
We work at a couple different prisons in the state, a medium security men's prison and a maximum security women's prison in Mitchellville, Iowa.
I call myself a feminist, and that means everything I do is feminist. Everything I think, everything I say. So starting with our first class, asking what feminism is, it's huge. That's what we're going to answer the coming 8 weeks.
When I think of the word feminism, what that means is equal rights for all people. And it's always been focused particularly on women because we've always been second-class citizens. But I think true feminism is everyone.
There's a really famous sentence related to feminism. The personal is political. It's a statement that says a lot about the feminist movement and what it means to be feminist.
We can say something that happens to us very specifically, and you make it big. My father was abusive to my mother. That's something very personal to me. But that's something really big because a lot of husbands are abusive to their wives. A huge amount.
My dad was very abusive to my mom, and she just did it. It just didn't matter. She didn't leave. When my mom and dad would get into a fight when I was little, she would have bruises or whatever else, and she would just lie to the family, and they would just let it go. 23 years she went through that, and I only went through it for 13, and I took off. Where my sisters stayed, and one was pregnant and married by the age of 15, and it was okay, and this was not that long ago.
When I got married, it was barefoot and pregnant. That's the way that my husband perceived our marriage.
All my life I've had this thing where I had to be with somebody. My dependency, I'm not sure where that came from. And I have been. I've had multiple marriages that have failed.
I thought that I should stay home, have my babies, clean house, do the dishes. It's all there.
Like when you bring it up as a feminist issue, people are often like, oh,
it's a coincidence.
Yeah, you have to make a path and a connection between all of these things because it's not just one thing.
What about like in the prison systems now? I mean,
a man and a woman can get the same charge, the same amount of time, start at the same time. There are so few beds in work release facilities for women that she might get a parole to work release, but she has to sit in here and wait 5 or 6 more months to get a bed in a work release facility.
That's why we end up doing more time than they do, and on the same charge.
You can say that's just my problem, but then if 100 more women say the same thing, then we have a bigger issue here. When we say something is political, we mean that it's not coincidental, that there's a structural problem, something bigger than all of us.
The principle in feminism that the personal is political, I think, is particularly important when we look at women in the prison system. That what has happened or what their personal lives reflect, they reflect all of the major social issues that we struggle with in our society. That what they're struggling with is related to the fact that they were born female.
Women and men aren't equal, right? Anywhere you want to look, women and men aren't equal. The moral position, and they should be. That's all you need to support feminism. Most Americans agree with both of those statements, by the way. We think gender equality is a zero-sum game. If women win, we will lose. We think this is a level playing field. So any policy that tilts it even a little bit, we think, oh my God, water's rushing uphill, it's reverse discrimination against us. Let's be clear about this. White men in the United States are the beneficiaries of the single greatest affirmative action program in the history of the world. It is called the history of the world. Gender equality is not a net loss for men. It might be the best thing that ever happened to us.
Yeah.
I grew up mostly nowhere in particular. I spent a lot of time in foster care. I have a life sentence. I've been incarcerated since probably 2002. So up until that time, I worked in clubs as a topless dancer.
I consider that I love my body, but sometimes I'll look at myself and I'll think is this the reason that I'm not dating someone right now? I'm not gonna pretend like I don't think that.
I would honestly say that this is probably the most time of my life that I've been so conscious of my body.
Yeah.
Just because you're with so many women every day.
After I had my children, I noticed I had stretch marks, my breast didn't sit up the way that I wanted to.
I look in the mirror At work, thoughts of suck it in, push it up, cover it up, exercise while I'm at work.
Why is it that I want to change myself? Or is it because I want to be more attractive to other people?
Our society keeps telling us that you need this product to look better.
I think that we are influenced by the media, and we do want our bodies to look sexy.
I used to be very, very thin, like this big. And I put on like 70 pounds in a very short amount of time, and all of a sudden I was walking around with somebody behind me and I realized that's my butt. I mean, just the body changes are very difficult to deal with, especially, you know, when I got so much validation for my shape and size when I was thin. I was an exotic dancer for most of the time.
Can you like feel good out of like selling sex or being sexual or being objectified?
I worked in the sex industry, and women can empower themselves with the attitudes with being objectified.
I mean, that can absolutely be such a power. I did it because I wanted to, because I got some sick power trip out of it. You know what I'm saying?
And ask yourself, why was that a power trip? Why is it even powerful to appear sexual?
But I think for me, it was seeing somebody a man that is in such a powerful position, so freaking weak. I mean, pathetically weak. I mean, you're willing to go home, you're willing to lose your entire life because you just spent your whole paycheck on me.
I think as long as it's your choosing to do that, then it's okay. It's not being forced on you.
For many of the women in prison, their only way to have any sense of power in their lives is through the sex industry. And they've used sex as a trade. I mean, sex has always been a commodity for women.
It's not a coincidence that this is the type of power women have over men.
I mean, like, I understand what you're saying, but I think that, like, bodies in themselves, like, have a certain power to them.
There's definitely a power exchange there, but the power has a definite glass ceiling.
For many of these women, using sex as their economic way of sustaining themselves is not out of choice, it's out of desperation.
Hi, baby girl, it's Mom. I love you, and look at what book I found. You're gonna love it. Chicka
Hi,
chicka
Ryan,
boom
this is
boom.
Molly. I'm going to read you another book today. It's called Beauty and the Beast. On average, we have probably about 60 women a month that come and read. We just bring out the books, and the moms come through and they pick out the books that they want to read for their children.
The worst thing to ever do is just to be separated from our children.
Yeah. My son learned how to talk and walk, and I wasn't there.
Because there's a lot of moms here who their kids don't get to come see them.
Red. They call me Red. Red bed.
Even if you don't get to see them, they get to hear your voice.
Once they're done, they bring everything back up to us, and we burn the CDs. It makes such a huge difference in the lives of the women and their children.
Okay, that's the end. I just read to page 5, and I would like for you to continue on in the story, and I love you. Here's my oldest son, Lonnie, and then my second oldest son, Little William. And these are my 2 younger ones. And this one, his name is Jeremiah, and this one is Denal.
I have 2 kids. My daughter will be 16 and my son will be 20.
I have 3 children, a 6-year-old, and her name is Sibley, and I have a 5-year-old, and that's Blaine, and then I have a 2-year-old, and that's Calvin.
Sorry, Christine. You always say that. And I think that, you know, like, a discussion of children is really important, like, as an institutional way to, like, oppress, especially women within a prison system.
Mm-hmm.
Who gets to decide whether or not you get your children back, or whether or not you get to see them, or who they live with? And, you know, like,
Or what say you have in the matter at all.
In a men's institution, the mothers keep the kids, so the kids aren't uprooted as much. When a woman comes to prison, they lose their mother, and a lot of times the father's not in the picture, so they really are parentless.
Over 60% of the mothers incarcerated for more than 2 years will lose their parental rights and never have their children again.
I signed adoption papers because I'm going to be out of his life for like 12 and a half years.
Iowa is quick, in my opinion, to take these kids. I have 2 life sentences without parole. 12 years later, I still have my parental rights.
I do still have custody of my kids, and they send me pictures, and every once in a while they write, and I talk to them on the phone. I'm a part of their life, but I'm a part of a faraway life.
Over half of them incarcerated never had a visit from their children.
I haven't seen him in 6.5 years, but I get pictures.
They come every weekend, but I mean, and it's okay now. I mean, I don't cry when they leave, but it sucks. Because I missed out on everything.
What happens if a woman comes to prison and she's pregnant?
I also had a baby while I was in here, so. See, I gave birth. I had a baby in September. I had him on a Saturday and a Monday. I had to give him to my parents.
If a woman comes to prison pregnant and has her baby, she'll deliver at Iowa City at the hospitals, and then if she doesn't have a family member to take that baby, it goes to foster care.
I mean, I know he knows who I am, but you don't get to bond. You know, they take them, and that's why I'm gonna fight for that when I leave here. Because your child should be able to stay with you.
Many other countries, women's prisons, women have, if they are pregnant and have their infant stays with them up to 2 years. There are often prisons in other countries where women who have young children can bring their children with them if they're arrested.
It sucks that I'm here and I'm not in my son's life, but it sucks more him wondering why I'm not.
I told my kids, I said, just hold on just a second and I'll be right back. And now it's 14.5 years later, and I'll be right back has turned into a lifetime away.
And during one of our meetings, I witnessed a conversation between two women that changed how I saw this forever. The black woman says to the white woman, "When you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, what do you see?" And the white woman said, "I see a woman." And the black woman said, "You see, that's the problem. When I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror," she said, "I see a black woman. To me, race is visible. But to you, race is invisible. You don't see it." And then she said something really startling. She said, "That's how privilege works. Privilege is invisible to those who have it." It is a luxury, I would say, to the white people sitting in this room, not to have to think about race every split second of your life. That is a luxury. That is privilege. Privilege is invisible to those who have it.
There are very few women of privilege in a prison. You know, if you have privilege because of class, because you have resources, because of race, education, there's a very small chance you're going to go to prison.
Who wants to give me their definition of how they understand privilege?
Advantage.
Advantage?
Favored.
Favored?
Entitlement that is not based upon effort.
For me, it took me a long time to really understand what it meant.
Now, you'll remember I was the only man in this group. So, and I heard this, and I said, when I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, I see a human being. I'm kind of a generic person. You know, I'm a middle-class white man. I have no race, no class, no gender. I'm universally generalizable. So I like to think that was the moment I became a middle-class white man. That class and race and gender were not about other people, but they were also about me. I had to start taking them on. And it had been privilege that had kept them invisible to me for so long.
I wanted us to explore a little bit the ways, which I think is sometimes hard to do, the ways that you've been privileged or your family has, or at least one way that you've benefited from some form of privilege. It obviously doesn't make sense to talk about necessarily right now, but you guys can talk about any point in your history, or if you want to, you can talk about being in prison and like the dynamics at least within the space.
It may sound strange, but being in prison in some ways has been a privilege for me in the aspect that I wouldn't have been able to take as many courses and classes on the outside. I wouldn't have been able to do that because those classes were probably very expensive.
It really makes you appreciate what you have, and it makes you feel bad because I take for granted my life and probably opportunities I had, where some of these women would they have to come to prison to appreciate an opportunity. That's sad.
And then the other kind of backwards thing in prison is that because I have a life sentence, I'm privileged in this environment because I'm here, I'm stable. It's really sad to me that people have to come to prison to get those opportunities, that those opportunities are not there for them until they come to prison.
For some of these women that grew up, their mothers did not provide a safe environment. They grew up in that total dysfunctional, abusive house up until the time they committed their crimes and came to prison. And this is the first time that they felt safe, where they can go to bed at night and they don't have to worry about who's climbing into their bed. And they don't have to worry about their next meal or being cold at night or anything like that. And it's sad when you come to prison to be safe for the first time in your life.
Pretty much from the time I was 3 years old, we traveled all over the United States. My mom and stepdad used to write bad checks and stuff like that to get money and stuff, so it was chaotic. Usually we stayed in one place for less than 6 months, just moving around, running from the rest of my family and the law enforcement. We got taken away when me and my sister were 5 or 6 and put in foster home. Stayed in Nebraska and made her take parenting classes, and she got us right back. Once we got back with our mother, it was back to the moving around and not knowing what was going to happen and all that.
I was not privileged within the environment that I was in. You know, I grew up in, foster care and, at the lower end of lower class. I left home when I was 15. I've never known who my father is, and my mother's an alcoholic. It's almost a very typical childhood that leads you to a life that I had. I'm sitting here thinking, I guess I got food stamps, Is that a privilege?
Yes, it is.
Or is that a right? I don't know.
When we look at women in prison, you can predict almost who's at risk for going to prison. In any country I go to, I ask them which group of women in your country are the most disadvantaged. And then I ask them which group of women are overly represented in your women's prison. And those two groups match in every country.
I grew up hanging out with the bikers, the guys. My parents are bikers. There was drugs everywhere. My first memory that I can remember, me and my mom were going to visit my dad in prison, and the guy that was driving us, they were like passing this plate of cocaine back and forth over the seat. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was my life.
In some families, there is this culture. It's a prison culture, if you will, that they've seen their grandparents go to prison, someone of that generation, and they see one of their parents go to prison, and they actually think it's almost inevitable.
I grew up thinking that my dad, if he loved me more, if he loved me a little more, or if I was better, maybe he wouldn't keep going to prison. Maybe he wouldn't keep leaving me.
And it's also, I think, really hard to deal with thinking that some choices you made in life or the place you are now has something to do with privilege. Your privilege has a lot to do with who you are and where you'll end up in life.
My mother was 15 when she had me, and my father was 18. He was really not around. He had another family right away.
My mom is a body piercer. My dad's a tattoo artist. I grew up in a tattoo shop. My dad was in and out of prison my whole life. My parents sold drugs.
I don't remember too much of my childhood. I've blocked out a lot of my childhood. I grew up in an abusive home. My dad was an alcoholic. He abused me, he abused my mom.
I was molested by one of my mom's boyfriends, about 9 years old, and I believe that really changed everything.
By 9 years old, I was smoking and I was using marijuana. By 11 years old, I had tried meth.
I started doing meth when I was 12. I divorced my parents when I was 16. I moved out when I was 15.
About 12, 13 years old, I started doing drugs and running away. And I just kept going down that road.
I ran away from home. I didn't come back. I've never been back since then, so I just moved on my own, and I went through a lot of stuff in that. I was homeless. Just, you know, it's a rough life when you're 13 years old out there and you don't have anybody to turn to.
It went out of control really, really fast, you know? And then I got my indictment. I have a 15-year drug sentence, federal drug sentence.
The number of women who are incarcerated for either their drug use or selling drugs, but these are very low-level drug dealers. The people who are the major drug dealers are not in our prisons. They're not. It's the low level.
I sold small quantities of drugs. I was involved in very small quantities, quarter gram, $25 worth of drugs.
I'm under a conspiracy drug charge, which the feds, you don't even have to do it, just talk about doing it. And so there was no drug deal or anything. It was just, I talked about it and got 20 years for that.
The war on drugs has actually been a war on women. And we can see that looking at any state and any women's prison.
It's really important to know that like, the language is often about you as an individual. You know, this is the way that they kind of hide these ideas of like institutional oppression. If they say like, oh, it's about you and the thing that you did and you needing to be punished for that thing. But in reality, like you bring it back and you see like these huge reasons why these things happen.
When we talk about a woman who's experienced domestic violence, substance abuse, poverty, racism, yes, it's her personal life, but this is a structural issue. This is not an individual issue.
We are supposed to be a nation in which everyone can get educated. But Christine had to be a 60-year-old woman put in prison to get the classes that she wanted.
I think it all goes down to this idea that we believe our actions are individual and that privilege has nothing to do with what kind of life we'll end up living.
The rhetoric around these women's crimes is that they did something wrong as an individual. They have to be punished as an individual. But it's about like these individual choices that aren't actually there.
But wouldn't it be easier to just accept that I did something bad and that's why I'm in prison? I mean, are we helping them or are we making it harder?
Feminism is hard. It's hard to constantly question the things that people do to you and the things that people say to you, but it's important.
I did a trauma and abuse class, and our assignment is that we have to write a fairy tale. Starts with once upon a time and ends with and they all lived happily ever after. And you have to write it from the perspective of you at the age when you experienced your first trauma. And I was just in a panic when they said that. I was like, well, how do I do that? I was too little. You know, I was 3 years old watching my dad rape my mom. I mean, I remember being really little, being in the little footy pajamas, and my dad and my mom fighting and throwing things at each other and running out and saying stop and getting thrown in my crib by my dad. How do you write a fairy tale of what you would have wanted your life to be like when you're so little, when it's already impossible to have a fairy tale, you know?
National statistics estimate that about 60% of women in prison have been victims of domestic violence or sexual assault prior to coming to prison.
Between 60 and 70% of the women have been physically or sexually abused before age of 10. Okay? Then they also have been sexually or physically abused in their adolescence, and then again in their adult lives. And in a comparison study between men and women in prison, the women had 3 times as much abuse in their childhood as the men did, and 8 times as much abuse in their adult lives as the men did.
An abusive relationship doesn't only involve physical violence.
There is no construction in this article about like how pervasive domestic violence is.
There is absolutely no reason that a human being should hit a human being.
Most of the abusers I know enough to hit you where it's not going to be seen.
There's so many women that go through this and go back to them.
I'll never forget the first time he slapped me. He choked me, pulled a gun out on me, spit in my face. It changed me. The relationship changed me, literally, as a person, you know? And so I think that my relationship had an effect on why I committed the crime that I did, you know? It played a part.
You know, like talking about boyfriend crimes. You know, like the way that boyfriend crimes put so many women in prison is like an institutional form of oppression.
A boyfriend crime is a crime that happens where a woman is with her boyfriend, but she actually doesn't commit the crime. And this can happen in a lot of different ways.
One of my really good friends has a 17.5-year mandatory because her boyfriend robbed her friends. And she did not participate in the robbery. And she was offered probation to testify, and she didn't want to testify against her boyfriend. And so she's sitting in prison with a 25-year sentence with the 17.5-year mandatory, which means she cannot even be considered for parole for 17.5 years.
So it's these crimes that occur where women are present, but they're not necessarily involved in it at all, or didn't even know it was going to happen.
Rodney, who was my husband, became very abusive. On the Sunday, Rodney had come. We had gotten into a big fight. I said, I'm divorcing you, I'm leaving you. I can't take it anymore. My dad will take care of everything. I'm not even worried about it. My daddy's got me. My daddy will take care of everything. And the next day, he and his friend, they robbed and killed my parents.
In a lot of cases, she's not part of the planning in a crime. She doesn't want the outcome. She doesn't want the crime to happen.
I was implicated in the murder. His friend, who got a plea bargain, said that I knew about it beforehand and that I did nothing to stop it. And here I sit. In Iowa, you can be convicted on hearsay. You do not have to be at the crime when it's committed. You know, I was, 12 hours away, working at a hospital, completely documented with a black eye, and in Iowa, it doesn't matter. You can be convicted on circumstantial evidence, hearsay. And here I sit.
There are women who are forced to commit crime or coerced into participating in crime by their batterers, a crime that they never wanted to have happen. And now they're held entirely liable for it.
You know, I just lost all will to live at some point, and when you're that low, there's always somebody that's going to pick you up, and then once they pick you up, they have you, And that was the end of me. He beat me, but he also emotionally abused me. He just made me his. I don't know. I can't even describe it, but he sold me, and he put a needle in my arm, and took away my life, and he's the why I'm here. We went on this really terrible journey together, and it ended up with somebody's death, and that's why I'm here.
In some cases, if you are trying to cope with the abuse, with the pain and the confusion, and just all the emotions that come with it, you might use drugs to numb your body so that you can handle the abuse.
I numb myself with my alcohol. And when I got mad, that's what I did. So it was kind of like a shocker to everyone for this to happen. Like, oh my God, that's not Felicia, you know what I mean? But what people don't know, what was happening behind closed doors, that made me angry.
Often people ask me, what do you think we should do about preventing substance abuse? And my answer to that is you stop violence against women and girls.
I don't think that society is really kind of opened their arms around trauma yet, or the fact that they could be in prison due to trauma.
Ms. Dice, how long had Bryan Street abused you?
For about 5 or 6 years. I was started getting sexually abused when I was 3 years old by my grandpa. First was my grandpa, my first stepdad, my mom's friend, and my last stepdad. And it went all the way up until I got locked up at 17 years old.
I think people are surprised at the level of victimization that a lot of women have gone through and how directly it's related to their crimes.
Tell us about the crime. What happened?
On March 31st, 6 years ago, I set fire to my house to try and kill my stepdad. And at this time, I wasn't planning on getting out either, just tried to kill everybody. Well, I got out of the house, my stepdad got out, my mom got out, my brother and sister ended up passing away in the fire.
Tracy Dice was sentenced to 45 years behind bars after she torched the family home trying to escape the sexual abuse she endured from her stepfather, this man, Bryan Street.
Miss Dias, you stated that you set the fire to kill Bryan Street because he was having sex with you and you couldn't take it any longer.
I just broke down and I just couldn't take it no more. When I was going through all that abuse, I didn't know who I was. I can't tell you what I did from the morning I got up. I couldn't tell you what all I did throughout the day when it came to myself. I tried to run away a couple times. There was 2 reasons why I came back, the kids. If it wasn't for the other 2 kids in the house, I probably could have ran and stayed gone.
And had he started showing attention to your sister?
It took about a year before he started doing it to my sister.
Had you gotten a little too old for him?
No, he kept doing it to me and her both. Like I said, from the time I was 3 to the time I was 17, I got abused. So where does that put my mind frame at? My grandma was there half the time when it was going on with my grandpa. My mom was in the room half the time when it was going on with us kids. Where does that put me at?
My childhood was kind of tumultuous. You know, everybody looks at the house and they think that everything's okay, and then there's all this abuse and turmoil going on in the house that nobody knows about, and you just have to keep it secret.
My father, he's abused 3 generations of women. His sister, my mom, and then me.
My mom went to my school and told them that my dad was abusing me and had me taken into the nurse's office and checked, and they asked me where I had gotten bruises from. But, you know, nobody ever really did anything.
Sometimes when people experience trauma, it can change their brain and how their brain functions. When they experience trauma repeatedly, that can set them up to experience post-traumatic stress disorder.
PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, many of you might have heard of that from soldiers. This is a problem shared by approximately 60% of the women who are incarcerated.
I think when I first came here, I was kind of bewildered as to why I had committed my crime. I didn't know that I was so affected by certain things. You know, I just thought I was okay. You know, as soon as I got to college, I thought, oh, you know, my problems are over now, and I'm away from my dad, I'm away from all this terrible stuff that I grew up with. And then, you know, what I did as soon as I got there was basically replicate the same situation that I was in growing up with somebody else. I started nude modeling for this man who was 42 years old in his house once a week. And, you know, it was a bizarre situation and it was secretive, and it was just kind of a continuation of what I had grown up with.
In our study, we found that those who experienced childhood sexual abuse were more likely to have PTSD symptoms and more severe symptoms.
I'm in prison because I killed the man that I was nude modeling for in his home one day after probably about 3 months of going there. He approached me and we were in his bedroom, and I just basically went far beyond what I needed to do to get out of the situation and get out of his house.
Sometimes people with post-traumatic stress disorder experience flashbacks. They are in the present time and doing something, and all of a sudden a smell or a sound or where someone is touching them on their body triggers up a memory from their past that's a traumatic memory. So now all of a sudden, instead of experiencing what's actually happening right now, they are back experiencing what happened to them during the traumatic event.
You were afraid, and you stated that earlier. You were afraid he was blocking the door, and you feared that he would force you to engage in sexual conduct.
I had already gone through all of this stuff. This situation mirrored everything that I had been through.
As I entered the room, the door shut. He had his back to the door, and I was in front of him. He told me that I wasn't going to go anywhere, and I started stabbing him.
When they react, they're not necessarily reacting to what's happening in the present time, but maybe what happened in that traumatic event.
Miss Lewisell, you had a scholarship to ISU. You were a very intelligent person. And during all of those times, you still continued. You did not stop seeing him. You still continued. Why did you ever go to his home? I don't understand it.
I was very gifted intellectually, but I was not very mature on an emotional level.
The psychologist who reviewed me when I came into the system said that I had gotten through all my problems by just blocking everything out, and that I had learned to block everything out and pretend like everything was okay. And I didn't have the awareness to get help for myself that I needed at that time.
The way in which people experience abuse and the impact it has on their lives varies widely.
Because there are also a lot of women that are abused that don't commit crimes. However, those women struggle with their abuse histories also, just often in different ways.
I understand. I've read your file front and back, and you had a horrible life, and you yourself was a victim. But you lived right across the street from the sheriff. There were plenty of people that you could have gone to for help. Tracy, something else could have been done.
I always used to try and tell somebody, whether it was the school, the police, or whatever. I don't know how many times the state of Nebraska came to our house and it was a pigsty. Made my mom clean it up, get all of us kids out of the house, go to our grandparents, clean it up, then they let us come back. The police knew what was going on, but they didn't want to step in, they didn't want to intervene. Sometimes it's easy, like if you get someplace to go, but I mean, when you're 17 and you've been abused from the time you're 3 years old till then, and you try to tell people and talk to them, and I mean, where are you supposed to go when you're 17 years old?
We use these words, victim and offender, as though they're two separate groups of people. My experience is all the women in the criminal justice system have also been victims, and yet we don't provide victim services for them. We don't think about their rights as victims. Once they've stepped over this line, and now they're only seen as an offender.
Ideally, it'd be wonderful if we had a staff of psychologists. We only have 2 to 600 women.
The women coming into the system need so many services in so many ways, and yet they come into a system that was never designed to provide any of these services. Criminal justice is really a culture of control. And when we look at physical health care, mental health care, substance abuse treatment, that's all about culture of change. And so there's this automatic cultural conflict that goes on in prisons all the time.
Really great, and I want you guys to know that, and it's meant a lot to me.
It's been the day of the week that I personally look forward to, and it's really because of you.
How has your experience in a feminist classroom had an impact on you?
This class has really helped me make sense of a lot of things in my own life and in the lives of the people around me.
I really didn't think about what we've gone through and how we've gotten where we've gotten to.
I think it just empowers me by
Let me know that I do have rights and I do have power to stand up for myself and for other women.
I understand that on the streets I got so dependent, I always thought I needed a man.
But prison just changes you for real. Makes you be, I think it helped me being a feminist. Because now it's all women, you know, obviously you can live without depending on a man.
All my life I've had this thing where I had to be with somebody. The one thing I've learned is that I don't have to depend on a man.
Us being women, we need to embrace ourselves and be comfortable with who we are. I am a feminist now because I am just as equal as the next. I have a lot of goals about when I leave here. You know, I just want to do so much. I want to do so much because I lost so much, and I just don't want to come back.
For me, like, taking this class was more or less so that I can be a strong woman, so that I can show my daughter how to be a strong woman. I just want her to know that we should be able to have everything that a man should have.
Our lives and our mothers' lives and our sisters' lives are like poster lives for what not living in a feminist society can do.
I've been here for 6 years, and this is the best class that I've ever taken.
So it's been a lot of light in my life to do these things.
I'm a mother, I'm a friend, I'm a prisoner, and I think that I'm a feminist on top of all of that.
I'm Tracy and I'm a feminist. I'm proud of it too.
The idea that you break the law, you go to prison, that's something that's been so ingrained in our culture, and it's been so long since it's been revised or even questioned.
Technically we have prisons, so like those people are not committing crimes. But like if they're not violent, like are they really like a danger to society right now? Like it doesn't really seem like that to me.
Every time I go to women's prison, I ask a warden, what percentage of the women who are here do you think need to be here? And the wardens tell me that maybe 20% of the women need to be there. The rest could be in the community because they're not dangerous, they have not committed a violent crime, they're of no risk to the community.
Some of them are going to get a second chance, you know, so some of them have accepted the fact that they're not going to get out. Some of them are making the best of their opportunity while they're here. Some of them still believe and hope that they're going to get out. Maybe they will, you know, with their appeal process, or the governor can always commute their sentences. But it's tough when you see young 20s and 30-year-old women that's going to spend the rest of their life in prison. It's sad.
Yvette Lewisell, along with Tracy Dice, asking Governor Branstad to commute their prison sentences.
Will go before the Iowa Parole Board tomorrow morning, asking to be let out of jail early.
She says Dice, in prison for arson and manslaughter, along with Lewisell for first-degree murder, deserve a second chance.
Today is July 15th, 2011. The interview of Yvette Lewisell, inmate number 805144, is called to order.
The commutation process is a lot different than a criminal trial. We're not concerned with proving guilt or innocence.
Commutation is completely at the discretion of the governor. He doesn't have to do it.
I'm sitting here today and asking not for justice, because that was decided by a court of law. What I'm asking for is mercy. And I'm not so much asking for mercy for the person that I was 23 years ago. That person was immature, irresponsible, had poor decision-making skills, lack of insight into the long-term consequences of her actions. The person sitting before you today has worked hard. I believe that I am not the same person that I was when I took Keith Stillwell's life.
Here in the state of Iowa, we don't have the death penalty. So if you receive a life sentence here in Iowa, we expect you to die in prison.
I believe in the possibility of rehabilitation. I think it is possible for people to change their lives. And then I think they need a second chance and to be released.
I do believe, however, that it is not too late for me to be a productive citizen.
Despite the fact that I've done the worst thing that you can do as a human being, which is take somebody else's life, that I can still do something positive for the world.
I think there are women who have taken a life who need to have the opportunity to be paroled.
The only way that can get changed is if the governor commutes your sentence to a term of years at which time the board can review you for consideration for release.
The interview of Tracy Dice, inmate number 6294178, is called to order.
Okay, when I set the fire, I was 17. I know it was wrong. I'm trying to work on counseling, and I plan on going to therapy, working with people, and using my coping skills that I've learned since I've been incarcerated, and plan to gain even more coping skills while I'm here. I just want maybe for you to be able to look at my sentence before my mandatory is up and maybe give me a chance before then.
Okay, at this time, I will call for votes. Remember, to get a positive recommendation from the Board of Parole, the votes must be unanimous.
I'm at work release, and this is my last step before I get to go home. And I just finished serving 3 years on a 10-year sentence at the Mitchellville prison, and I am currently at a facility serving 6 months as part of my parole plan. I was in prison because I used to have a daycare in my home, and one of the children that I was caring for had a seizure, and I called an ambulance. And after she left in the ambulance, they said that she had a skull fracture and that the only place that it could have occurred was at my home. And because I was the only adult there, therefore I had to basically take responsibility for that. And she's been fine and healthy, but I'm not really scared, I guess, for myself. I'm more scared about my children and what people are gonna say to them. I think I'm afraid of people not wanting their kids to play with my kids or come to our house. And I mean, and really, I get nervous and worried about being around other people's children anyway. I get nervous about being around my children, you know, because if something happens, I'm gonna be the one who's blamed, you know. I do still call myself a feminist, and part of my whole reentry thing is being myself and finding out, you know, what I like and what I dislike. I've got 5 more months to do here, and then I will get a parole from the parole board and I will go home. It's been quite an experience, and I'm moving forward.
I was released from prison in 2009. I had a 20-year sentence, and I served 6.5 years.
This is me. This is all I have, and it's me and my kids. That's what matters.
My money situation could be a whole lot better, but right now I'm living off of my student loan money and child support. I went back to school, and I finished my associate's degree that I had started prior to me going to prison. I am currently going for my BA in Human Services and Psychology with the Certificate of Art Therapy.
This is my boys' room right here. It's small, but they got beds to lay in.
I think my struggle comes in at is being a parent. As soon as I got out of the facility, my mom and my husband kind of pushed the kids off on me. That was one of my prayers, is to get all the kids and come straight home and have them. But I didn't know how to handle that parenting part. I think my children still kind of feel like I owe them because of all the time that I missed.
I still think the oldest one is still angry. The middle one I know is angry. And the 2 youngest ones, they're okay with it.
My oldest son, he stays with his grandmother. He can't actually stay here with me because he had got himself in trouble. He caught himself selling drugs in a school, and so he was sent to jail. My second son, he got in trouble just recently, and I'm just like, I don't want to throw my hands up at it, but I don't know what to do as a mother. I done seen my whole family kind of go through the prison system.
I went to the penitentiary in '89, so that's why I tell my kids, don't follow my footsteps. I want you to do better than me.
And I don't want to see my children in the system, and that's one thing I said when I was going through my treatment, is that I wanted to break the cycle In my family, I want them to know something different, that they don't have to go out and sell drugs. They don't have to fight. They don't have to do that. There's other ways to deal with whatever you're going through.
I want to kind of forget that place and just kind of move on and not have to talk about it. But I find myself having to explain or defend those that are in prison. You know what I mean? And so that's, things that I have to do, and I have to say, look, I've been there. I know. More than anything, it's just to be able to stay clean, be able to take care of my kids, and finish everything that I set out to do. You know what I mean? And just live life like everybody else. That's all I want. That's all I want.
Okay, at this time, I will call for votes.
Ms. Dice, I am encouraged by your comments about your need to improve.
You are doing a good job. We encourage you to keep up the good work.
Just recently this year have I started actually working through stuff and dealing with stuff since I've been locked up. Because sooner or later, I'm gonna walk out those gates. I've been taking classes. I've actually got my GED now. I've been doing a lot of self-help books. I've been talking to my counselors. I've been talking to psychologists, and a lot of the staff have helped too. They've actually seen where I've came from and how much I've improved.
Ms. Dias, you have not served enough time, and you yourself know that. You haven't served enough time.
I'm not impressed by statements on your part that you feel you've served enough time on this sentence.
Personally, I could handle sitting the next till I discharge, which is another 17 years in here. But I want to get out there. I actually want to have a family of my own. I actually have kids. Raise them how I should have been raised. I want to get reconnected with my grandparents. And maybe even get reconnected with my mother. Who knows?
And even though I do believe that you're sorry, I really believe that, but it's not coming over.
At this time, I cannot support your request. I will be a no vote.
My vote is no.
My vote is no.
My vote today is no.
I did have a life sentence, but it has been overturned by the appeals court, and I'm going to get a new trial and a new chance. I have a bond right now. Can you believe that?
A bond?
It's incredibly expensive, and nobody could ever afford it, but it's like $500,000. But if I had $500,000, I could leave.
I've been here almost, 3 years, 8 months. And I finally get to see the board in May. I'm scared. I'm scared to leave. I'm scared I'm institutionalized. I'm scared my children won't want anything to do with me. I'm scared that I've let them down so much that, where do I pick up the pieces? So I'm very nervous about everything.
I went to work release for 3 months, and from there, a family kind of adopted me. I got my own apartment, was living by myself, was doing very well, and I got stupid, like everybody, and decided that I wanted to go out shoplifting, even though I don't need it. I went out, I had my debit card, I had the money there, and I decided to shoplift, and they violated my parole. When I came back, there were a lot of people that were really disappointed in me. I have not been mature at all, very childish and very irresponsible. And now I'm able to say, no, I don't want to do this, or no, I don't want to go anywhere, and no, I'm not coming back to prison.
About a year ago, I had a breakdown, but I was going through a lot of emotional stuff and changes in my life. I was always numb to, not having feelings, not going through the emotions like a normal person. And I was taught how to have emotions at 36 years old. And that's sad to say, in prison, but yeah, I can't wait to be me out there. Well, yeah, so one of these days.
This is the longest I've ever lived in one place in my whole life. Ever. My whole life. I was arrested when I was 21. And I'm 30. I've lost too much. It's not material possessions. It's not a person. It's so much of my life that I've lost.
I've given the state of Iowa, 14 years of my life. Iowa doesn't have the death penalty, So they give life without parole, which is actually a long, drawn-out death sentence. It's saying that I'm a criminal who can never in life be rehabilitated or be okay to be in society, and that's not true.
Ms. Lewis-Hill, I commend you on the many activities, programs that you've done and accomplished, and I think that is just a tremendous effort.
You have given a lot to Mitchellville. You've mentored a lot of young women. You have also become a role model and a very talented person.
No matter what your situation is, you can still maintain hope. I've always had the attitude that, you know, maybe 15, 20, 25, 30 years, I'm going to get that chance. Although 15 and 20 have obviously passed and I still haven't gotten that chance, but I still have that hope.
Your request for commutation is supported with numerous letters of recommendation, but there's also letters opposing your commutation.
As you ask for mercy, to me, mercy is Iowa not having the death sentence.
I think because what keeps me going is the hope that this is not it. Somebody told me today that this was it, that I was going to be here forever, and that all I was ever going to accomplish in my life was what I was going to do in here. I don't know for sure if I'd be able to keep going the way that I do now.
Based on what I've heard today and reviewing the file, my vote is no.
At this time, I cannot support your request. I will be a no.
My vote will be no.
My vote is no.
It's devastating when a woman is turned down. The stories of what they've gone through are harrowing. And not being able to fix that, and to know that it's happening to other women right now too, and that some women don't survive it, is unbelievable and painful.
As human beings, we like things to be clear, yes, no, black, white, you know. But life, most of life is gray. You know, there's a lot of sort of in-between stuff. And I don't think we do well with gray at all. I think it's hard.